My father stopped pouring the wine when I told him I wasn't sorry, and that was the moment my mother set down her fork like it was made of glass. "Excuse me," she said. "I said I'm not apologizing to Bridget," I repeated. "She stole from the company. I have the bank statements." We were sitting in the dining room of my parents' house in Oakville, the one with the view of the lake my father loved to remind people he could afford. My sister Bridget sat across from me with her wine glass halfway to her mouth, frozen. Her husband Trevor was beside her, very interested in his lamb. "Margaret," my father said, using my full name the way he only did when he wanted to remind me whose roof I was sleeping under, "you will apologize to your sister, or I am calling the university on Monday morning and pulling your tuition. Final semester or not." I looked at him for a long moment, then I said, "Okay, that was it, just okay." I picked my napkin off my lap, folded it, set it on the table, and went upstairs. By 6 the next morning, my room was packed. Not in a fit of rage, I'd actually been packing in pieces for 3 weeks already, ever since the first time I found the discrepancy in the ledgers. I just hadn't told anyone it was already done. Bridget found me zipping the last duffel bag and went the color of skim milk. "Please tell me you didn't send it," she whispered. I didn't answer her. I zipped the bag. My father appeared in the doorway a minute later, his robe half-tied, his face doing something I'd genuinely never seen it do before. Not anger, something closer to fear. "Send what?" he said. "Margaret." "Send what?" I'll back up. I'm 26. I'm in my final year of a master's in forensic accounting at a school outside Toronto. And I have spent my entire life being the quiet, useless one in a family that built a very profitable property management company out of nothing. My parents, my parents are Lorraine and Walter Hensley, and they own Hensley Property Group, which manages something like 40 rental buildings across the GTA. To everyone at their golf club, we were the perfect Canadian success story, hard-working immigrants' kids who clawed their way into the right postal codes. Inside the house, it was different. I was the one who didn't smile enough in family photos, didn't go into the business, didn't marry well, didn't perform the right kind of gratitude. My older sister Bridget did all of that beautifully. She was 30, she was the director of client relations at the company. A title that meant almost nothing functionally but looked excellent on LinkedIn. And she was married to Trevor, a polished, soft-spoken man from an old Rosedale family, whose money, it turned out, had quietly evaporated 2 recessions ago. My parents adored Trevor in a way that had nothing to do with Trevor. They adored what he represented: old name, good schools, the right last name on a wedding invitation. They made him CFO of the company within 18 months of the wedding, over 3 people who'd worked there a decade, and nobody questioned it out loud, because questioning it meant questioning the thing my parents wanted most, which was to feel like they'd arrived. I noticed the first irregularity by accident in March. Doing a favor for my mother, she'd asked me to just look over some year-end statements because I was good with numbers, which was the closest thing to a compliment she'd given me in years. There was a transfer, then 3 more. Small enough to not trip anything at a glance, routed through a numbered company registered in Alberta that had no employees, no website, and no reason to be receiving consulting fees from a property management business in Mississauga. I didn't say anything for 2 weeks. I just kept looking. By April, I had a full picture. Trevor had been quietly bleeding the company for almost 2 years, moving money through that Alberta shell into accounts that eventually landed, after enough hops, somewhere offshore, Barbados, as it turned out, which I would later find darkly funny given how many people from Barbados apparently watch true family drama content, but that's beside the point. The number, when I finally added it all up, was just under $900,000. I brought it to my parents privately. I made an appointment, like I was asking for a business meeting with my own mother and father, because that's what it had become. I laid out the printouts on my father's desk. I showed him the routing. I showed him the dates that lined up exactly with Trevor and Bridget's renovation, their Muskoka cottage down payment, the new Range Rover in the driveway. My father didn't even really look at the papers. My mother looked at them for about 4 seconds and then looked at me like I'd brought a dead animal into the house. "You've always had a problem with your sister having things," my mother said. "This isn't about Bridget having things. This is fraud." "It's a loan," my father said. "Family helps family. You wouldn't understand that, you've never had to." That sentence sat in my chest for days. You've never had to. As if the entire reason I'd gone into forensic accounting, the entire reason I sat in libraries until midnight while Bridget posted brunch photos, was some character flaw instead of the simple fact that nobody had ever handed me anything, so I'd learned to find things instead. I let it go publicly. I kept being the dark sheep, the difficult one, the one who didn't smile right, and underneath that, very quietly, I kept building the file. By the time of that dinner, the one with the wine and my father's threat about tuition, I already had everything. Bank records, the registered agent for the numbered company, even an email Trevor had stupidly sent from his work account referencing moving the Cayman piece before year-end. I'd spent 3 Saturdays at the library downloading public corporate registry filings just to make absolutely sure nothing I had was obtained any way that could get thrown out later. I wasn't doing this to win an argument at dinner. I was building something that could survive a courtroom, so when my father told me to apologize or lose my tuition, something in me just clicked into a kind of stillness I didn't know I had. Okay, I said. Because by then, it genuinely didn't matter what they did with my tuition. I had already sent the full file, every document, index, dated, source noted, to the Ontario Securities Commission's whistleblower line and to a forensic fraud lawyer in Toronto who'd agreed to look at it pro bono after I cold-emailed her at midnight in a fit of exhausted defiance. I'd hit send 4 hours before that dinner, I just hadn't told anyone yet. So when my father stood in my doorway the next morning asking, voice cracking slightly, "Send what, Margaret?" I finally answered him. "The file," I said, "on Trevor. To the OSC and to a lawyer." My mother made a sound I'd never heard her make before, something between a gasp and a word that never fully formed. "You had no right," my father said, his voice rising now, all that fear curdling fast into rage, the way it always did with him. "This is a family matter. You don't air family matters. He stole almost $1 million from a company you spent 30 years building," I said. "I think you should be thanking me." "Get out," he said. "Get out of this house." I was already leaving, I said, and zipped the last bag. I want to be honest about the next 4 months because they weren't cinematic. They were a Motel 6 off the QEW with a heater that rattled all night, 3 roommates I found on Facebook Marketplace to split a basement apartment near campus, and a part-time job doing bookkeeping for a dental office that had absolutely no idea their new hire had, in her off hours, been the person who'd reported a near $1 million embezzlement to a provincial regulator. I missed 2 tuition payments before my advisor quietly helped me get an emergency bursary pushed through. I ate a truly humbling number of meals that were just toast. What I didn't do in any of those 4 months was check the news for updates, even though I desperately wanted to. My lawyer had told me clearly, "Stay out of it publicly, let the process run, don't give anyone an opening to say I'd acted out of malice instead of evidence." So I went to class. I tutored undergrads for cash, I waited. The investigation took 5 months in total. When it finally broke, it broke hard. A business reporter at the Globe got hold of the OSC filing and ran a piece with the headline practically writing itself, "Toronto Property Empire's CFO charged in near 1M fraud scheme." Trevor was arrested on a Tuesday morning, which I only know because Bridget called me sobbing at 7 a.m. and I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it later, alone, in my tiny basement bedroom. She didn't apologize. She begged me to fix it, like I was the one who'd built the shell company. I didn't call back. What collapsed after that wasn't just Trevor. It was the whole structure my parents had spent 3 decades polishing. With Trevor under investigation, the bank pulled 2 lines of credit pending review. 2 major commercial clients quietly walked. My father, it turned out, had personally guaranteed several loans against company assets that were now frozen in an active fraud investigation, which is a very expensive sentence to be true. By the following spring, Hensley Property Group wasn't dead exactly, but it was a fraction of what it had been. And my father, who had built his entire identity around being a self-made man, was 61 years old, watching it get carved up by lawyers and creditors, with his golden son-in-law in a courtroom and his golden daughter unemployed and quietly divorcing him. I want to say I felt only satisfaction. I didn't. I felt something closer to grief, honestly, watching it happen, even from a distance. It's strange to grieve a family that was cruel to you. But you can hold both things. I grieved the version of them I'd hoped existed, and I did not for 1 second regret what I'd done. It took 2 more years. I finished my master's. I got a junior position at a forensic accounting firm in Toronto, the kind of firm that actually investigates the things my family used to do at dinner parties under the table. I built a life that was small and entirely mine, a 1-bedroom in the East End, a dog named after nothing in particular, a handful of friends who had no idea my family had once been written about in a business magazine. My parents reached out exactly once during that time, an email from my mother that opened with, "I think it's time we moved past this," as though I had been the one who'd done something requiring forgiveness. I didn't respond. Some bridges you don't burn out of anger. You just stop maintaining them, and eventually nature does the rest. The thing about being the dark sheep your whole life is that nobody expects you to come back to anything. They certainly didn't expect me at the company's 30th anniversary gala, which my father, against every piece of financial logic, still insisted on holding that year, smaller, in a rented hall instead of the lake house, but still happening, still performing the family's permanence to a room of people who half suspected it wasn't real anymore. I wasn't invited. I came anyway because by then I wasn't the same person who needed permission to walk into a room. I stood at the top of the staircase for a second before I went down, in a navy suit I'd bought with my own salary, watching the room go quiet in that specific way. Rooms go quiet when something has shifted and everyone feels it before they understand it. My mother's hand found my father's arm. Bridget, divorced and thinner than I remembered, looked up from her glass and didn't move. Nobody said anything to me. I didn't need them to. I walked down the stairs, got myself a drink at the open bar I technically hadn't been invited to, and stood by the window for a while, looking out at a room full of people pretending an empire was still standing, when the one person who actually knew, in detail, exactly how much of it was gone, was the daughter they'd once threatened to cut off over a dinner she didn't even finish.